What's going on, YouTube? GamerGod85 here with a special review for Now That's What I Call Gaming. Before I get started, make sure you subscribe, like the channel, leave any comments down below, and help me grow this channel out to be the best it can be. Now, a couple months ago, I did a video and I said in gaming news the NES Classic was finally coming back. And I was one of those people who was out there on June 29th, was at Best Buy at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I got one. Yay me! And I came home that night from work and I started playing it and I was having a great time. Nintendo still hasn't corrected one big problem with it. They made a great controller, which is authentic Nintendo controller, but they gave us too short of a cord. Now, if you want that authentic nostalgic experience of sitting 2 feet from your television tethered to your system, this is great news for you. But for the rest of us who've adapted to modern gaming, sitting back in our comfortable chairs, back from our televisions, this just don't cut it anymore. Everyone likes to use wireless controllers, and there's many different options out there for, the NES Classic. You've got your Nyko Mini Boss and your My Arcade controllers, and you have a couple of other options. But one of the best companies I found for wireless controllers for these kinds of systems is 8bitdo. As you may remember, a few months ago, I reviewed these SNES Classic controllers from 8bitdo for the SNES Classic. And these have been great. They work awesome. They feel every bit like a legitimate SNES controller does. And they could work for the NES Classic. 8bitdo also used to have an NES 30 controller that gave you the authentic feel of one of these, but with all the buttons you would find on one of these. And now they have the NES 30 Pro controller, which gives you the type of buttons you would find on a modern PS4, Xbox One type controller, but still having that nostalgic feel. One thing with both of these is they're Bluetooth controllers, so to use them on either the SNES or the NES Classic, you will need to also buy a separate Bluetooth adapter, which is a little extra money. I'll get into cost in a little bit. Now, like I said, you can buy these and use them on your NES Classic, but there's one big problem. The way the A and B buttons are laid out on the SNES controller are slightly different than how they're laid out on an NES controller. On an NES controller, they're in a nice straight line, so they're very comfortable. You're playing on your NES, and your thumb can sort of slide in between the two of them really easily, really comfortable. It's classic, it's almost instinctive. With one of these, your thumb kind of has to be at an angle to use it. It's very hard to show like this, but your thumb kind of has to be at an angle because A and B are just mapped to A and B. Now, while you can modify your NES Classic and remap all the buttons to be comfortable, that's a lot of work, a lot of tedious work, and there just has to be a better way. Well, now, there is. 8bitdo has finally released an answer to the prayers of everyone who has an NES Classic. Ladies and gentlemen, the N30 2.4G wireless gamepad. Just like the SNES Classic controllers, these are not Bluetooth. They are basically radio transmitters that you plug into your NES Classic, and the controllers work just like a regular NES Classic controller. So what we're going to do here is we're going to review this controller, we're going to test a few games out, and we're going to test them out by seeing how they work with the regular NES Classic controller and one of these. We're going to test the same game and the same levels. And in the interest of full disclosure, yes, I have already modified my NES Classic. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to only review these controllers using games that are on the stock NES Classic. I'm not going to play any of the ROMs that I have on, that I've added to it. I'm only going to review games that you would get if you bought this and one of these stock. So sit back and relax and let's look at these controllers up close and see how they compare. Okay, so let's start by unboxing the N30 wireless gamepad for your NES Classic. 8bitdo's always done really good with their boxing for all these, so here we got there's the main thing. We got the controller. Got the controller right there. Your instructions, which really this is easy to do. You got your recharger cord and your dongle that you're going to plug into your NES Classic. Now I've got a couple of, now I'm going to put these off to the side and we're going to see how this controller compares to an original Nintendo NES controller and the controller to the NES Classic. So size-wise, so comparing sizes, these all obviously are the same size. Obviously these two are going to be pretty close to identical because, you know, they were officially made by Nintendo. D-pads all look the same, the start and select buttons all look the same, A and B's all look the same. This one obviously has a few more buttons. Now, what are these extra buttons for? Well, obviously, the first thing we'll notice is we got Turbo A and Turbo B buttons. This, pretty self-explanatory. Everyone likes having those. This is the home button, which is gonna bring you back to your home screen without you having to get up and reset your NES Classic manually. Now, the 8bitdo Super Nintendo pads had a feature built in, but you would still have to press down and select to do that. This one, you're just going to end up pressing this one button. Buttons are all very nice and clicky, just like you'd be used to. And I know Shane from Re-Res will appreciate that the D-pad feels like it's on a central pivot. It's not, you know, a straight button. So you can't push all of it down at once. So I know that's a very big deal to him and probably to a few of you other gamers. But yeah, it feels very legit. You know, like a nice build. I mean, we can see thickness-wise, they're about the same thickness. So yeah, this feels pretty legit. It feels like a legit Nintendo controller. So now, let's test it against its cousin on the NES Classic and see how it holds up. Okay, so now for the main event. We are going to test 3 games to test the different functionalities of this thing. Now again, I've modified my NES Classic. As you can clearly see, I've got some games that you wouldn't have on yours, like, you know, Castlevania 3 or Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest Redacted. So we're going to test 3 games using this. Looking at the list. We'll test Mega Man 2 because Mega Man 2 requires you to have pinpoint platforming skills, so input lag would definitely show on that. We'll test Double Dragon 2 for the turbo button functionality. No, actually we'll test Gradius for turbo buttons because, you know, those types of shooters are ones you'd want to have turbo features in so you don't have to keep clicking the button. And then for a final one, we'll just make a classic with Super Mario Brothers and we'll wrap it up with that. So without further ado, like I say, we're going to do it in a 2-stage thing. First, we're going to test the game with the stock NES Classic Controller. And then I'm going to unplug it and test it with 8bitdo's new controller. So let's get going. Okay, so first up we got Mega Man 2. And I think we'll test Bubble Man stage because his stage has a lot of platforms and the water level requires you to be pinpoint on the way you handle spikes. Alright, now we got the spikes. Kill that fish. Now a really good player should be able to get almost all the way up there. And there should be no lag between letting go of the button and hitting the spike. Now, I did that on purpose so that we go back. Oh well. Let's just restart this one. And here's the NES 30. Same level. Feels pretty good. Feels about the same as the regular NES Classic Controller. I'm not noticing any kind of input lag with it. Buttons feel responsive. They're doing what they should be doing. Got the fish again. This would also be a good place to sit and just use your turbo feature to kind of farm free extra lives and stuff like that if you needed it. But that's not what we're here to do today. Let's see how close we can get to the spikes. The response is perfect. Now we'll hit the home button and that functionality works out great. So next up we're going with Gradius, and this is going to be where we test the turbo functionality. Now you can see just holding the shoot button down fires a very slow shot. If you want to be faster, you have to keep constantly pressing the button. Make your shots go faster, otherwise you just get this nice slow little plink shot. While this is doable, it definitely does, grate on your thumb after a little while. I think we got enough to test, enough to show that. So now we're switching to our NES 30, and we're going to try the turbo buttons. Now look at that. It's doing the turbo functionality really well. I just have to hold down the button and I'm shooting all the things down. Getting the laser with turbo is always a good thing. Definitely makes the game much easier. Once again, we hit the home button and we'll go back. And just because everyone knows what this game is like, we're gonna do Super Mario Brothers. And now we're going to switch to the wireless. Now I'm going to restart because we all know Mario. That's another thing. You always got to press start to pair it with the thing. Once you see the light blue, you know it's paired. And as an added bonus, we're going to try out Mario Brothers just to see what if we get any interference when we're playing two-player mode. Nothing changing, you know, Luigi's moving when Luigi's supposed to be moving, Mario's moving when Mario's supposed to be moving. Either player can go back to the home menu, but only player one can control the game. So now let's give it a final thought. So should you get the 8bitdo N30 2.4G wireless gaming controller? I'm going to say yes. The fact that it's got a dedicated home button, the turbo A and B buttons, really make this a perfect controller, and the fact that it feels just like the NES Classic Controller, right down to the color scheme even matches your NES Classic. Now, as I said, you can get the Mini Boss or the My Arcade controllers. Those run about $20, so a little bit cheaper than this at $25. An even cheaper option is the Retro Receiver, which will allow you to use any Bluetooth controller you currently have. But like I said before, you would have to remap the buttons after you modify your system so that you can get it comfortable for you. If you wanted to go full-on retro like that, the NES 30 Pro controller runs about between $35 and $40, so you can see how that can add up. But for $25, you can get yourself one of these and have perfect control over your NES Classic games with your turbo buttons and your home button. So it's really worth a buy. Now, I know I'm supposed to be doing a video about my video game boxes I get from Retro Game Treasure. I am working on that. It's taking me longer than I anticipated. I do have the footage shot for that. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to start recording my voiceovers for that. I'm hoping to get that out within the next month. Once things in my life are going to be taking a big turn. I'm going to have 3 kids in school. and I'm going to still be doing school myself. Plus I work full time, as I've said, so it's going to take me a little while. I appreciate you all bearing with me. Again, if you like the channel, give me a subscribe. Don't forget to ring that bell so that you get notified of everything. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.